In the incessant hum of an international airport, where time feels suspended and improbable paths cross in the tapestry of global life, an encounter was woven that transcended the ordinary, an unexpected bridge between distinct worlds, yet united by the search for something that surpasses earthly borders. There, amidst the coming and going of destinations and the silent anxiety of departures and arrivals, a moment of profound revelation unfolded, a dialogue that, by its singularity and the weight of the words spoken, would reverberate far beyond the boarding gates, culminating in a message from the leader of a nation to a man of faith, a communication so intimate and surprising that it left an indelible mark on the soul of those who witnessed it and transformed everyone. Is perception of the power of divinely orchestrated meetings, a story that now unfolds in its entirety, inviting us to contemplate the unfathomable mysteries of providence and the humility that can emerge in the most unexpected places, coming from the figures we least expect. Prepare your hearts to unveil this extraordinary account, a testimony to how the spiritual and the temporal can meet, bringing with them a wave of hope and contemplation. But before we delve into the details of this encounter that defied all expectations and the words that were spoken with such intensity, ensure you are on board this journey with us. Subscribe to our channel now and join a community that values narratives that touch the soul and unveil higher purposes. The polished marble floors of the airport corridors reflected the artificial light, creating an environment that was both impersonal and filled with untold stories. A transient stage where thousands of lives intersected every hour, each carrying its own burden of expectations, weariness, and the uncertain promise of a new destination. It was in this setting of perpetual motion that two men, whose trajectories seemed to belong to completely different universes, one immersed in the complexities of political and military leadership of a nation in challenging times, the other dedicated to the propagation of faith and the shepherding of souls on a global scale, found their paths converging not by schedule or protocol, but by the pure and simple tapestry of chance, or as many would come to believe, by the intricate and perfect orchestration of a higher force that governs the universe and weaves the threads of human destiny into patterns the rational mind often cannot decipher. On one side, President Ibrahim Traore, a figure recognized by the weight of responsibility he carried on his shoulders, the nation under his command facing multiple and complex challenges, each decision weighing with the future of millions, the public image often portraying strength, determination, and the inherent loneliness of exercising supreme power. Even in transit, away from palaces and command centers, the aura of his position accompanied him, a mix of respect and curiosity hanging in the air around him. But behind the facade of the resilient leader, there existed a man, with his own longings, concerns, and perhaps a silent questioning about the path forward amidst so many uncertainties, seeking answers that perhaps were not in governance manuals or geopolitical strategies. On the other side, Apostle Joshua Selman, known worldwide for his deep spiritual connection, his ability to touch hearts and minds through preaching and ministry, a figure whose influence extends across continents, guiding believers and ministering hope in times of hopelessness, his journey marked by unwavering dedication to divine service and the manifestation of the power of faith. He too was in transit, traveling in fulfillment of his spiritual commitments, his presence conveying remarkable serenity, a beacon of calm amidst the airport's hustle and bustle, carrying with him not the pressures of a state, but the responsibilities of a spiritual calling, touching lives and sowing principles aimed at transforming realities from the inside out, with an authority that emanates from a source transcending the material world. The collision of their worlds was not preceded by trumpets or warnings, but happened in a simple and unexpected way, a casual encounter in a busy corridor, an instant of mutual recognition amidst the anonymous crowd, where the formality of office and the solemnity of calling gave way to the genuine surprise of seeing each other there. At that improbable convergence point, the Apostle Selman, recognizing the president, approached with the reverence due his position, but with the warm familiarity that the faith community often shares across borders and cultures, extending his hand in greeting, a gesture that sealed the beginning of an interaction that both, unbeknownst to them, would come to consider divinely planned, a hiatus in their travel routine that would open space for an exchange far more significant than a simple protocol greeting. Initially, the conversation flowed with the expected lightness between public figures who meet serendipitously, touching upon the formalities of travel, the destinations to be reached, and the trivialities that fill the spaces between life's grand events, a ballet of careful words that did not delve into the depth of the responsibilities each carried. However, beneath the surface of this initial interaction, there lingered a latent sense that this encounter held a greater purpose, a pause in the continuous flow of time that invited them to go beyond the superficial, to explore the common ground that resides in shared humanity, regardless of the mantles of power or the spiritual callings that distinguished them in the eyes of the world, a silent invitation to shed the armor of their roles and meet as men before the complexities of existence. Finding a relatively quieter corner, away from the main flow of passengers, they allowed themselves a moment of privacy in the midst of the public space, an apparent contradiction that, paradoxically, created the environment conducive to the vulnerability that would follow, to the opening of the heart that would not be possible under the watchful eyes of a crowd or in an official meeting room. There, under the diffused light and the distant roar of airplanes, President Traore and Apostle Selman found themselves in a space where titles mattered less than the soul, where the burden of the leader could be momentarily shared with the understanding of a spiritual guide, and where a conversation that began with pleasantries was preparing to plunge into the depths of the human condition and the search for meaning and direction in a turbulent world. The atmosphere of the conversation gradually transformed, moving from initial formality to a tone of greater intimacy and trust, driven perhaps by the mutual perception that this encounter was not mere chance, but an intentional pause in the course of events, a singular opportunity that Providence seemed to have orchestrated for a specific purpose. It was in this environment of growing openness that President Traore, feeling moved by an internal force or recognizing in Apostle Selman a spiritual confidant in whom he could place a burden too heavy to carry alone, began to unveil the layers of his soul, allowing vulnerability to emerge from behind the image of fortitude the world knew, revealing the unimaginable pressures that weighed upon him, not just the obvious responsibilities of governing, but the disquiet that haunted his lonely hours, the dilemmas that defied political and military solutions. He spoke of the immense weight of leadership, the solitude of power, the constant vigilance required to navigate the turbulent waters of national and international politics, the challenges of meeting the expectations of a people yearning for peace and prosperity, all of which created relentless pressure that wore down not only the body, but more insidiously, the soul. He described the sleepless nights spent deliberating on decisions that could cost lives or change the course of his nation's history. The overwhelming feeling of being the focal point for all hopes and fears, the spiritual burden of guiding millions while, internally, seeking a clarity and strength he felt were beyond his own human capacities, a longing for a wisdom that did not come from the advice of his advisors or strategic analyses. In this moment of shared deep introspection, President Traore expressed the growing conviction that the challenges he faced possessed a dimension that transcended the purely physical or political, recognizing the existence of battles fought in the spiritual realm that had direct repercussions in the visible world, a perception that led him to seek answers and aid on a higher plane, beyond diplomatic negotiations or military operations. The presence of Apostle Selman there, at that exact moment, seemed to confirm this intuition, presenting himself not only as a religious leader, but as a potential emissary from that spiritual realm where he believed the true solutions to his nation's problems could be found, or where the necessary strength to persevere could be infused directly into his soul, making that fortuitous encounter the unexpected answer to a silent prayer or a deep longing that inhabited the innermost recess of his being. It was then, imbued by the atmosphere of trust and the sense of a greater purpose that permeated that unexpected encounter, that President IBRAHIM Traore, the leader of a nation, turned to Apostle Joshua Selman and uttered words that would echo with a surprising weight and sincerity, a message that, given its origin and the context in which it was delivered, transcended the realm of the ordinary and entered the domain of the extraordinary, shocking not by its content of threat or denunciation, but by its profound and unexpected humility, by the open confession of a vulnerability rarely associated with figures of such high rank, and by the explicit recognition of a pressing spiritual need at a moment that seemed crucial for his country. "Apostle," he began, his voice laden with the visible weight of a burden that no political armor could hide, "I carry the responsibility of a nation, a burden that at times seems to crush the soul, and although we face visible challenges and opposing forces seeking to destabilize our path. The most arduous battle, the one that consumes me in the hours of silence, is the battle fought within me. The desperate effort to discern the divine will amidst the reigning chaos, the search for a wisdom that transcends human understanding and guides my steps towards peace and prosperity for my people. At this moment, finding you here, I feel compelled to confess that I am spiritually exhausted, navigating waters that seem dark and uncertain, and I desperately need guidance, a word that comes from the kingdom, not just for the president, the public figure, but for the man IBRAHIM TRAORE, who in his innermost being seeks the face of him whose power is infinitely greater than any earthly throne. I ask you, Apostle, to intercede for me and for my nation with the depth of your spiritual connection, to help me find the clarity and strength to lead under the anointing and wisdom that comes from above." The surprise in the air was not one of shock in a negative sense, but of awe at the frankness and depth of the confession, the courage required for a head of state to expose his spiritual vulnerability to a religious leader in a public setting, however discreet the corner found. Apostle SELMAN, in turn, received those words not with astonishment, but with a deep solemnity and visible empathy, recognizing in them the sincere cry of a soul under immense pressure, the authentic search for a source of strength and wisdom that he knew was available, the confirmation that the challenges we face on the physical plane often have their roots and solutions in the spiritual plane, and that the humility to recognize divine need is the first step to accessing it. That moment of confession and request, spoken there between boarding gates and flight announcements, solidified the conviction that this encounter was not accidental, but divinely marked, a potential turning point, not only in the president's personal journey, but by extension in the destiny of the nation he represented, showing that even at the highest peaks of earthly power, the need for divine touch and spiritual guidance remains a constant reminder that all ultimately are pilgrims seeking direction under the gaze of a higher force, and that true strength often resides in the ability to recognize one's own weakness and seek help where it genuinely resides. In the face of that poignant and unexpected confession, Apostle Joshua Selman did not hesitate. His countenance, which had previously denoted the surprise of the meeting, now reflected profound compassion and a spiritual authority that filled the surrounding space, transforming that corner of the airport into an improvised sanctuary, a place where the temporal and the spiritual met in a tangible way. He responded with words of encouragement and faith, uttering prayers that echoed with power and hope, not only blessing the president in his journey, but ministering directly to the burden he had shared, invoking divine wisdom, spiritual strength, and the peace that transcends all understanding for the leader and for the nation he served, a moment of intense and genuine intercession, right there, in plain sight, albeit in their own sacred space, that sealed the seriousness and purpose of that encounter. The farewell, when it finally came, was not abrupt, but carried with the quietude that follows moments of profound significance. There was a handshake that seemed to carry the weight of mutual commitment. The president strengthened by a new infusion of hope and spiritual clarity, the apostle with the certainty of having fulfilled a divinely assigned task, a bond forged between them that went beyond the political or social, entering the realm of shared spiritual connection under unique circumstances. The silence that followed their separation, as each went towards their respective destinations, seemed to amplify the reverberation of the words spoken and the impact of the encounter, leaving an indelible mark on both and the implicit promise that this moment on the cusp of a journey would have ramifications that only time would fully reveal. Thus, the story of the encounter between President IBRAHIM TRAORE and Apostle Joshua Selman at the airport, and the shocking message of humility and spiritual quest spoken by a man of power to a man of faith, remains a moving testament to how the divine can break into the mundane, how vulnerability can be the gateway to true strength, and how encounters orchestrated by providence can become turning points in the lives of individuals and, potentially, in the destiny of nations. It is a powerful reminder that, beneath the mantles of authority and the pressures of the world, resides the human soul in its incessant search for meaning, direction, and connection with the sacred, proving that even in the most unexpected places, like the busy corridors of an airport, faith can find its voice and hope can be renewed through the simple yet profound act of sharing a burden and seeking the light. May this narrative touch your heart and broaden your perspective on the mysterious ways in which faith operates in the world. If this story resonated with you, if you felt the emotion and depth of this encounter, show your support. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Leave your like so this message can reach more people, and share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue sharing accounts that illuminate the soul and connect hearts worldwide.